In the vast and often turbulent waters of the South China Sea, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse is constantly playing out between the world's two largest naval powers, the United States and China. It's a theater of strategy, deception, and calculated risks, where a single misstep can have global consequences. Recently, an encounter unfolded that perfectly illustrates this tense dynamic. A story of cunning deception by Chinese vessels and a subsequent miscalculation by Beijing that they will likely never repeat. So what exactly happened? How did Chinese ships manage to deceive the mighty US Navy? And what was the critical mistake that followed? Stick with me as we unravel this incredible story of modern naval strategy. It all began with a routine freedom of navigation operation, or FONOP, conducted by the US Navy. A US warship, likely a destroyer from the 7th Fleet, was sailing through international waters in the South China Sea, asserting the right of all nations to navigate freely. This is standard procedure for the US, aimed at challenging what it sees as excessive maritime claims by various countries, most notably China. Beijing, however, views these FONOPs as provocations, infringements on its claimed sovereignty over nearly the entire South China Sea. In response, the People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, almost always dispatches its own vessels to shadow, monitor, and often harass the American ships. This time was different. As the US destroyer proceeded on its course, it was shadowed not by the usual Greyhound PLAN warships, but by a fleet of what appeared to be civilian fishing vessels. At first glance, this might seem innocuous. The South China Sea is teeming with fishing boats, but these were no ordinary fishermen. This was China's maritime militia, a force of state-sponsored, quasi-military vessels disguised as a civilian fleet. This is the deception part of our story. By using these militia boats, China creates a layer of plausible deniability. They can harass and obstruct a US warship without it being a direct military-to-military confrontation. If the US Navy takes action against what looks like a civilian boat, it risks a massive international public relations disaster. China can then paint the US as a bully attacking innocent fishermen. It's a clever, asymmetric strategy designed to put the US commander in an impossible position. The American destroyer was surrounded, its movements constricted, all while being goaded by vessels that officially weren't even part of the military. The US Navy, of course, is well aware of this tactic. They have extensive intelligence on the maritime militia, but knowing about it and effectively countering it are two different things. The American captain had to exercise extreme restraint, navigating a minefield of both physical and political risks. The Chinese ship sailed dangerously close, cut across the American vessel's bow, and engaged in other unprofessional maneuvers, all designed to force the US warship off its course. It was a tense standoff, a display of Gray's own warfare, where the lines between peace and conflict are intentionally blurred. The US ship held its course, refusing to be intimidated, and eventually, the maritime militia vessels peeled away. On the surface, it might seem like a win for China. They had successfully harassed a powerful US warship using civilians, showcasing their control over the area without firing a shot. And this is where Beijing made its critical mistake. Feeling emboldened by this encounter, the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda machine went into overdrive. State-controlled media outlets began trumpeting the event as a massive victory. They released edited videos and published articles claiming their brave fishermen had expelled the American invader from their waters. They portrayed the US Navy as weak and cowardly, forced to retreat in the face of China's righteous civilian fleet. The narrative was clear. America's power is waning, and China is the new, undisputed master of the South China Sea. This propaganda was intended for both a domestic audience, to stoke nationalism and support for the government, and an international one, to project an image of strength and dominance. But this aggressive and boastful messaging backfired spectacularly. Why was this such a mistake? Because it completely blew their cover. The entire strength of the maritime militia strategy lies in its ambiguity and plausible deniability. By openly celebrating the militia's actions as a state-directed military operation, Beijing admitted to the world exactly what it was doing. They effectively stripped away the civilian disguise and confirmed that these were not just fishermen, but agents of the state acting on military orders. The international community, particularly nations in Southeast Asia who are also victims of the militia's bullying, took notice. Countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia have long complained about this gray zone tactic. Now they had official confirmation from Beijing itself. China's propaganda handed the United States and its allies the perfect piece of evidence. US diplomats could now go to international forums and say, "Don't just take our word for it." China itself has admitted to using these civilian-flagged vessels for military purposes. This mistake had several immediate consequences. First, it hardened the resolve of regional countries. Instead of being intimidated, they became more determined to resist Chinese coercion. The Philippines, for instance, became even more vocal in exposing Chinese actions around its reefs and shoals, releasing its own videos of maritime militia harassment. Second, it gave the United States and its allies, like Australia and Japan, greater justification to increase their own naval presence and cooperative patrols in the region. The narrative shifted from the US being a foreign provocateur to the US helping regional partners defend themselves against a confirmed aggressor. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it forced the US military to adapt its own rules of engagement and tactics. With China openly admitting the militia is part of its armed forces, the distinction between a planned warship and a militia vessel became less significant. While the US would still exercise caution, the operational leash on American commanders was loosened. The risk of treating a militia vessel as a combatant was now lower, because China itself had labeled them as such. Beijing quickly realized its error. The boastful propaganda articles were quietly scrubbed from the internet, and official spokespeople reverted to the old, ambiguous language, referring to disputes between fishing vessels. But the damage was done. The cat was out of the bag. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. This incident serves as a powerful lesson in modern geopolitics. It shows that warfare is no longer just about ships and missiles. It's also about information, perception, and narrative. China's attempt at clever asymmetric warfare was undermined by its own hunger for a propaganda victory. They won the tactical battle in the water for a few hours, but in doing so, they lost a much more important strategic information war. For Beijing, it was a mistake they dare not repeat. They learned that in the 21st century, transparency, whether intentional or accidental, can be a weapon. Their greatest strength in the South China Sea, the ambiguity of their maritime militia was compromised by their own hand. Going forward, you can be sure that China will be far more careful about what it brags about. They will continue to use their gray zone tactics, but they won't be so quick to take a victory lap in public. The silent game of deception will continue, but the rules have subtly changed, all because of one crucial, overzealous mistake. This ongoing saga in the South China Sea is one of the most critical geopolitical stories of our time. Understanding these intricate moves and counter-moves is key to understanding the future of global power dynamics. What do you think? Was this a major blunder by Beijing, or just a temporary setback? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this analysis insightful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into global affairs.